Before we begin, I want to establish something clearly. This is not a video about blaming individuals. It is not about labeling or attacking a specific group. This is a psychological exploration for those who find themselves trapped in repeating relationships, for those who quietly ask, why does my life keep unfolding the same way? And especially for those standing at a turning point in life, their late 40s, 50s, and beyond. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. In youth, life hides your patterns. Attractive appearance, social opportunity, constant stimulation, and relational abundance. These factors act like a mask. They cover what is unresolved within you. But as life progresses, those buffers begin to disappear. And when they do, something very precise happens. What was hidden becomes visible. Not your circumstances, not your partners, but your structure, your psychological structure. There is a concept often expressed in Eastern philosophy that says a person is pulled not by what they choose consciously, but by what they are unconsciously attached to. If we translate that into modern psychological language, it becomes even clearer. Unresolved desire does not disappear. It repeats, and with repetition it strengthens. This leads us to a critical insight. Human beings are not defined by change. They are defined by repetition. And that repetition is not governed by willpower, but by unconscious architecture. Now, let's address the central topic of this lecture. What many people casually label as sexual behavior. Addiction is often misunderstood. At the surface, it appears to be about desire, an excess of impulse, a lack of control. But that is not the core. Beneath it, almost without exception, you will find three structural elements: attachment deficiency, fragmented identity, and deep emotional emptiness. This is not a problem of desire. It is a problem of being. Let me make this even more precise. When attachment is unstable in early life, relationships are no longer experienced as connection. They become validation. You are not seeking love. You are seeking confirmation that you exist, that you matter, that you will not be abandoned. When identity is unstable, external responses become your internal worth. Rejection does not feel like disappointment. It feels like annihilation. And when emotional emptiness dominates, the mind seeks stimulation not for pleasure, but for relief. This is where the cycle begins. Novelty, emotional high, temporary relief, collapse, repetition. This is not freedom. This is a loop. Now, here's where things become more complex and more real. Why do these patterns often intensify rather than disappear in one's 50s? Because the environment changes. In earlier decades, individuals often have more relational options, more social validation, more distractions, more novelty. But later in life, those variables shift. Options narrow. Isolation increases. Dependence, emotional or financial, can deepen. And most importantly, avoidance becomes harder. At this stage, you are no longer distracted from yourself. You are confronted by yourself. And when that confrontation happens, the unconscious does not weaken. It becomes dominant. This is why many people are shocked by their own behavior later in life. They expected time to resolve them. But time does not resolve structure. It reveals. Now let's examine relational dynamics. People do not meet randomly. Psychological structures attract complementary structures. This is not coincidence. This is pattern alignment. There are three common relational dynamics that emerge repeatedly. First, the emotionally dependent partner. This relationship is intense, fast, consuming. Both individuals attempt to fill each other's emptiness. Initially, it feels like connection, but structurally, it is mutual instability. The result is predictable: exhaustion, conflict, emotional burnout. Second, the controlling partner. This dynamic is driven by power. One seeks control, the other resists. At first, control may feel like stability, but structurally, it creates pressure. Control leads to resistance. Resistance leads to conflict. Conflict leads to collapse. This is what psychology defines as a power dependency dynamic. Third, the stability-focused partner. This is often the most deceptive. On the surface, the relationship appears calm, stable, functional, but beneath it, something is missing. Emotional engagement. And for someone conditioned to seek high stimulation, stability does not feel safe. It feels empty, and emptiness drives behavior outward again. This leads to an important conclusion. The issue is not the partner. The issue is the pattern. You can change people. You can change environments. But unless the pattern is addressed, the outcome remains structurally the same. Now let's talk about marriage, particularly later in life. Many assume marriage will stabilize everything, but marriage does not solve problems. It reorganizes them. In many cases, relationships persist not because they are healthy, but because leaving is more difficult. Financial constraints, social perception, fear of starting over. So what you often see is not resolution, but maintenance. There are typically three forms this maintenance takes. A dual life structure, where emotional disconnection leads to external stimulation. A conflict loop, where unresolved dynamics repeat endlessly. Or a quiet emptiness where everything appears stable, but internally nothing is alive. And here is the critical point. A relationship can continue, while the emotional reality has already ended. So what is the real conclusion of this lecture? It is simple, but not easy. This is not about behavior. This is about structure. And structure does not change with time. It changes only with awareness. If you do not see your pattern, you do not choose your life. You react to it. But the moment you see it, you gain the possibility of choice. Not certainty, but possibility. And that is where change begins. Not with time, not with new people, but with confrontation. If this perspective has offered you clarity, not comfort, but clarity, then I invite you to stay with this channel. We explore human desire, relational dynamics, and repeating life patterns through the lens of psychology and philosophical insight. And if you believe this message might help someone else, share it. Because sometimes the most important turning point in a person's life begins with a single moment of recognition. In the next talk, we will go even deeper. What happens to these patterns in the 60s and beyond? Do they disappear? Or do they evolve into something more subtle, more hidden, and more entrenched? Because one truth remains: what is not confronted does not end. It continues. Thank you.